So in this tutorial, we're going to create an application that combines the best of both worlds of Django and React. So Django, the popular Python web development framework, and React, the now extremely popular front-end framework for developing UIs. So I recommend, if you do not know much about Django, then please take a look at one of the introduction courses on this channel for Django. There's plenty that you can watch to get started on that. And for React, there's also plenty of courses and videos on YouTube. I'll link a few in the description of this video. And so if you are then comfortable with working in both of those, then let's get started. So here I'm just inside my terminal. I've got an empty directory here. And so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to work out of this directory. So I'm going to make a directory and we'll just call this DJ React. And so if we change into this folder, I'm going to make a front-end folder and a back-end folder. So now we have back-end and front-end. And so before we continue, I'm just going to show you that I'm going to be working out of Visual Studio Code. So I've decided to start adopting this for Python now as well, and for Django specifically. So if you aren't using Visual Studio Code, then that's fine. You won't be affected by not using it. You can still use something like Sublime Text, but for front-end frameworks, I already use Visual Studio Code as my preferred editor. So this just makes it a lot more convenient to work out of one editor. And so if you want to get started with it, you can just download it for your computer here. And then to start actually configuring it, you'll want to go here to the docs. And so this just specifies a couple of things. So here you can just read a little bit about Visual Studio Code to catch yourself up to speed. But I mean, it's a normal IDE, very intuitive, and definitely my favorite so far. And then you'll just want to go down to Python, and you can go through a tutorial here and just check out a bunch of the settings here that you can define. I'll show you this inside the project as well in a second, but just for clarity, I just want to show a couple of these things for linters. So that's code language highlighting. PyLint is the default package that's used for that. And so we're going to just define some settings to do that. So one thing to take notice of is here the Python linting lint args, and then going down as well the pep8. You can then specify errors to ignore, which we'll also have to define in a second as well. So all in all, go through this whole setup, just reading about it, and then down in the settings reference, you can see all of the things you can describe and set inside your general settings. So just like the Python path, virtual environment path, and a whole bunch of other stuff here as well. So once you've downloaded that, then we can get started. But so now let's go into our terminal. And here I'm going to go into the backend. And so here what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating our virtual environment. So we'll say virtual env. This will create the virtual environment for us, and this will just be used for Django. So here I'm going to activate it. And so now I'm just going to say pip install Django to install the latest version, which is 2.0.7. Right, so now we're also going to need the Django REST framework. So if we go here into Chrome and just search for Django REST framework, here you can go to their website and check out the documentation. We'll also be taking a look at this. But so now if you go to installation, here you can say pip install Django REST framework. So we'll just do that. So now that's installed as well. And so let's just clear this out. So here we have the virtual environment. So now let's just call Django admin start project, and I'm just going to call it DJ React. So now if we list this out, we have that folder there. And so now let's go into Visual Studio Code. So now I've opened the DJ React folder. We have the backend, and the front end is obviously still empty. But so here we have DJ React and we have env. So I'm just going to rename the DJ React folder to become source. So this is where the Django project is going to be stored in. And so now with this set up, we're going to check out this blog post here, and I'll link this in the description as well. But it's automationpanda.com, and then just type in that URL there. And so basically this is just a guide to setting up Django inside Visual Studio Code. And so basically you just have to install these 3 plugins. Once you've done that, this is just for Python syntax highlighting. Once you've done that, then you're pretty much good to go. And then if you scroll all the way down, then you'll have this settings here that you can add to your project, and just make sure you install those dependencies as well. So what you'll eventually end up with here, if we just create another folder, this is going to be the .vs code folder. That should be in that directory. So in your project directory, you've got .vs code, and inside there you're going to have this settings.json file. And here you can see then it says workspace settings, and this is by default the settings file for your project. So you've got your user settings, and then you've got your workspace settings. And I'm going to just copy the workspace settings into here. So just to zoom in and check those out. Okay, so here, basically it's the Python path. All right, so I'm on Mac, so mine will probably be different to yours, but if you have a Mac, well then it's probably going to be similar to this. If it's Windows, then just find out what your path is for you. Then you've got format on save, Python linting pep8 enabled, which is true. The pylint path I just set as pylint args. Again, this is by default what's specified over here. Pylint enabled must be true. And then the virtual environment path, that's quite important. So this is relative to the project that's actually open. So this meaning the DJ React folder, this folder, okay? This virtual environment path is relative to that. So here, $ and then the brackets workspace folder is referencing the DJ React directory. Then it goes into backend, env, bin, python 3. Okay, that's the virtual environment path. And then this linting pep8 args is just to ignore the specific error that I didn't like, which was just about the maximum string length on a file. So with this setup, you're good to go. Obviously, you can change this to suit your needs, but that's how I've set mine up. And so now we're good to go. So now you can toggle your terminal with this shortcut key. So if I just open mine up, this brings up the terminal, and this is the same thing as accessing this. So we actually won't even need this. So I'm actually going to deactivate that, and I'm going to go back one into the front end. And here I'm going to call create React app. And if you don't have that installed, then you're just going to need to install it. So this is the Create React App library that was created by Facebook for the React developers. And so here you can just follow the instructions here. So npm, you can install it. You just need Node on your machine. And then once you've got it, then you can create a React app just by calling Create React App. And so once you've got that installed, then here we can call, not inside here, but here we'll create a React app, and we're just going to call this GUI. So meaning this is the front end display of our application. And so I'm just going to let that install. So here, if we list everything out, we've got the back end and the front end. So we're going to go into the back end inside Visual Studio Code. And because I can only have one thing running in this terminal here, I'm just going to use this terminal for the front end and this terminal for the back end. So we'll activate the virtual environment, and then we'll go into the source folder. And now we have the DJ React and manage.py file. And so if we start by running the server, it says we have some unapplied migrations. So let's do that. Let's say Python manage.py migrate. Cool, so there's our migrations done. And so now we can run the server. And there we go. So let's check that out. We go here and we have our local server running for Django. Although we're not actually going to be using it as the front end, we can just see that it is working at least. And so to get started, let's just close this terminal here and say python manage.py start app, and we'll call it articles as a basic example. And so we're going to add articles to our settings. So if we scroll down to the installed settings here, then we're going to add articles, and we're also going to need to add the REST framework. That's coming from Django REST framework. So if we go back to the installation here, we need to add REST framework to our installed apps. We need this URL to be in our URL patterns. So let's go to our URLs here, and let's just close that, get rid of those comments, and I'm going to change this to a path, and we'll just fix that up. Include REST framework URLs, cool. And we'll just add a comma there as well. And what else do we need? So we'll just add this REST framework default settings here. So we go into settings, all the way at the bottom, just add that in there. Cool, so we check if everything is working so far. So let's just run the server. And it's telling us that name include is not defined. So let's just go there to path, and we need to import include, and it seems everything is good so far. Cool, so inside our articles in the models, we're just going to get started with the basic model, and this is going to be the article that's going to come from Django's model, and I'm just going to specify a title, which is going to be a character field, and it's just going to have a maximum length of 120, and then we'll specify content, which will just be a text field, and then we'll define string of self, and just return self.title, just like that. So now that's fine, and we're just going to migrate everything. So we'll say make migrations. So we've created the article now, and then we'll say migrate. Cool, so that's all good. And now we can just add that to the admin here. So we'll say from.models import article, and then call admin.site.register that article. And let's close that off now. Great, so let's check inside our admin. We also need to create a super user. So let's close the server there, call create super user, and just put in some details for this, and we'll run the server, and let's log in. So we've got articles. So let's just create two articles now. Right, so we've got two articles here, and so we're going to use the REST framework as our default API that we're going to use for our front-end application. So what we're going to do is just go to API guide and just take a look at the serializers. Now, a serializer is basically just a way of converting JSON data into a model. So that's why we use serializers. And so to get started, we're going to work out of our articles app, and I'm going to create a new folder inside there and call that API. Now inside API, we need to initiate that, so we'll create the init file, and we're not actually going to do anything in it. And we're also going to then create a serializers.py, and here is just where we're going to specify our serializer. So let's import the serializers from Django's REST framework. So we say from REST framework import this, and then we're going to just create a class which I'm going to call the article serializer, and this is going to come from serializers, and I'm going to make mine a model serializer. So this means here I can specify the class meta, and this means we just need to specify the model as article, so we just need to import that now. So we'll say from.models import article. Actually, that should be articles.models. So we've specified the article, and then we just need to specify the fields, which is just this tuple here, and we just specified title, and content, because those are the fields on the model here. So I'm just going to close that now. And then this article serializer we need to use in a view. So I'm going to create a new file inside API, which will be views.py. And so here we're just going to import the generic views. So if we go up to generic views in the documentation, then we're going to use the list API view, and we import this from REST framework generics. So here let's just say from the REST framework .generics import, and I'm going to import the list API view. And then here we'll specify a class-based view, which will make the article list view, and that's going to come from this list API view. And for these API views, all we just need to do is specify a query set. So this is going to come from the article objects. So I'm just going to make it article objects.all, and I'm going to import this. So we'll say from articles.models import article. And then we need to specify the serializer class. So we say serializer class equals to, and here we need to import the serializer. So we say import the article serializer and specify that as the serializer class. And then I'm going to make another view here, which is just the detail view. So I'm just going to call it the detail view, and that's going to come from the retrieve API view. So let's just copy that in there. So that retrieve API view is what is inheriting here in the article detail view. And again, I'll set the query set to objects.all and the serializer class to the article serializer. And so now we need some URLs. So we'll create a URLs file inside the API folder. And so first I'm just going to import the path from Django URLs. And then we're going to need our two views here. So I'm saying import the article list view and article detail view. And then here we just specify the URL patterns equal to a list here. And we just specify the path initially as an empty string. And this is going to be the article list view as view. And let's just add another one here and make it the detail view. And then here we're going to specify the primary key as the kind of regular expression that it's looking for to call this detail view. And so now we need to actually just include this URLs file in our project URLs. So we've got include here, and then here we'll just add another path, and this is going to go to API, and we're going to say include the articles API URLs. So just like that. So if we check if this is working, so now it's saying we've got an invalid syntax. Let's go to here. So we just needed to add a comma there. So now everything seems to be working. And so let's just close off a bunch of these files. So we've got the views done. We've got the serializer. We don't need our settings open. And so lastly, let's just check that it's actually working. So we've got two articles already. So let's go to the API URL. So /API. And then if we press enter, then we get a list of the articles in our database. And we can also go to /primary key and we get a detailed view of that specific article. So this is about as complicated as it will get for this tutorial on the REST framework. Let's actually check out the front-end stuff now. So I'm just going to close these folders, and we should have our, yes, so our Create React app is done. So let's go into the GUI and we'll type npm start. So this will run that server. And so now we get our localhost on port 3000, and we get this default sort of page exactly like how Django has. So I'm actually just going to close a bunch of these files here. And so now let's actually grab the data that's coming through from our API and display it in our React app. So we've got the GUI folder inside the frontend folder, and currently, if we check out source, we've got app.css, app.js, and this is where our app component is being created, and that is being rendered to the DOM inside index.js. And so we can immediately delete, let's say, the logo. We don't need that. And that means in app.js we can remove that logo. And okay, so the reason for that little faulty save thing is because our VS Code is inside the project directory. So actually we'll want it to be inside the backend so that it does not apply this whole linting to our front end. So this is only inside the backend. So now if we like change something here, so let's just add something like this, save, and now everything's fine. Cool. So here we've removed the image, and if we take a look at package.json, we've currently got React installed, React DOM, and React scripts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this UI simply just using a framework called Ant. So the Ant design is similar to the Material UI design. It's basically a component library that's been styled already. So you can check them out here. And if we click on getting started, and you can see all of these generic components that they've made, which you can then just import and customize if you really want to. But so for now, let's just get started with installing it. So we'll just say npm install and d and then dash save. So let's actually inside here, we'll say, actually making sure we're in the right folder, which we are. So we'll say npm install and d save. Okay, so now that this is installed, we can start using the Ant design inside our project. And so what you want to do is you want to import the CSS file so that we can get all of the styling. So let's just copy this, and inside our app file, I'm just going to import that, and we'll just get rid of that comment. And I'm going to delete everything inside the app component here, this div. And now we actually just want to start looking at how we can structure this design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the layout. So if we go to the layout component, then you can see a bunch of different layouts. And I'm just going to take this basic one here. So you can grab the code just like this, and then click copy code. And now we're going to create a components folder and a containers folder. So inside the source folder, I'll create components and I'll create containers. And so inside the container, we'll want to create our layout. So I'm just going to create layout.js, and I'm going to paste everything in there, but we aren't rendering this to the DOM, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to import React. So we'll say import React from React, just like that. And we're going to create our own component. So I'm going to say the custom layout takes in props and then just returns something. So I'm just going to grab the layout there, paste that, and we'll probably want to just tab that in a little bit. And so now the custom layout is the default export. So we'll say export default custom layout. And here inside the content, so this content part here, we've got this div, and I'm going to just tab that there. And inside the div is where we're going to want to render whatever is being passed into the layout. So I'm just going to output that dynamically and say props.children. So basically what that means is that whatever we wrap this component around, it's going to include that stuff inside this display. So the custom layout we're going to import into app.js. So let's do that here. So we'll say import custom layout from and this is going to come from the containers layout, and we'll just take that component, tab it in a little bit, and just like this would be a self-closing tag, but because we want to wrap this around something, we'll just make it a wrapping tag like this. And so immediately, if we check what this looks like, and let's actually just run the server. So yeah, we'll just say npm start. Then we get this little display that is showing, and that is the same thing as what was right here. So this is all working. The only difference is that here it was saying content, but now there's no content being displayed because there's no children that is being wrapped inside this component. So let's take a look for a list component, and that's this one here. So basically we're going to use this to list out our articles, and if we scroll down, then we can take this one. So the code, we'll just click over here and just click copy code. And now I'm going to go into components, and inside there I'll create a new file which will be article.js. And so here I'm going to start with importing React from React, and I'll say constant article takes in props, and it's just going to return some JSX just like this. So we'll get rid of that, and we don't want any of that inside our component. So let's just take that out of the component, and the import we'll put at the top here. So we're just returning a list item, and we just don't want that comma there. So we are going to export the article as the default export. So just say export default article. And so now this is what we want to use to display every type of article. So at the moment, there's this list of articles that will be displayed, but we will eventually remove all that data and display just one article component, and then we will render all of them inside a container. So what I'll do is I'll create a container here inside containers, and this will be the article list view.js. And again, I'm going to import React just like that, and I'll say class article list, which extends from the React component. Here we need to say render, which returns something, and we'll say export default article list. And so here we're going to want to render out all those articles. So this article component being exported is what we'll import inside the article list. So we'll say import article from, and we need to go back to components article, and I'm just going to render it out over here just like that. So now our article list is returning the article component, and we will change this in a second. But now our article list component needs to be outputted, and that would be inside our app.js file, inside our custom layout. So we'll grab the article list, and we're going to import the article list from our containers, and we will just paste it inside here as a self-closing tag. And so now if we check what this looks like, now we can see all the articles being displayed as the content for this little UI. So now the only thing to do is basically to make this display the data that's actually on our server. So we need to get that data, and so to do that, we're going to use a package called Axios. So I'm going to install this and say npm install Axios and dash dash save. So now with Axios installed, I'm just going to run this again. And so what we now want to do is we want to take all the data coming from the API and basically display that as the data that is being displayed here in the article component. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to call this articles just to actually be a little bit more specific. And we're going to import articles like this. And I'm going to take this method outside of the article function or the article file, and I'm going to put it here inside the article list view. And now I'm going to specify the data equal to something that's going to come through in this component. And so that means this property can actually be defined thanks to the props that's coming through here. And here we just need to specify the data source. So I'm going to make this props.data. Now at the moment, to make this still work the same, we would say data equals list data. And if we check, that's still running. So this is still working. And actually, let's get our app CSS file. Let's get rid of all of that and all of this as well. And actually, we might as well just get rid of the whole file there. And yeah, so now this looks a little bit better. So why we installed Axios is because Axios is a package that is sort of like Ajax, that you can make requests to post or get from servers. So that's what we're going to be using it for now. So inside the article list view, what we want to do is we want to query from the API and then render out all of the articles that are coming through from the API. So to start off, I'm going to go inside our article list component here, and I'm going to specify the state, and inside the state is going to have an array which is empty, and that's the articles, and we're going to store the articles coming from the API inside here. Basically, we're going to use the component did mount method, because that means when this component is being rendered, then it must get the data and so then update the state. So this method will be called every time the component is being mounted. So we're going to import Axios. So we'll say import Axios from Axios like that. And simply to use it, we just have to say axios.get, and then we pass in the URL. And this is going to be port 8000/API. So that's the article list URL to get the list of articles. And this returns a promise, so we can say .then. And then with that response, we then want to set the state. And what we want to set are the articles. So the articles is going to be the response data, because data is going to return the actual list of articles. So if we actually see what this looks like, let's log out the response data, and let's just inspect here. And so now we get this error here that says no access control header is present. So that's a server-side error. So what we want to do is we want to go into the source folder of our backend, into DJ React, into settings, and we want to specify the headers so that we can make requests to the server. So we're going to need a package for that, which is course headers. And so here is the GitHub link. So it's Django course headers. It's a separate package to the REST framework package. So we have to install it separately. So we're just going to say pip install and just paste Django course headers there. And so we need to add this as an installed app. So we're going to just go up here and I'll just paste that in there. So now we've added course headers. And then we also need to add middleware. So we're going to copy the course headers middleware. The Django middleware is already in there, so I'm just going to add it at the top of the middleware, just like that. And then I'm going to just specify course origin allow all to be true, just so that it does work. So at the bottom here, I'll just say that equals to true. Right, so now with the course headers package installed, I'm going to run the server. And so now, if we go back in here and refresh the page, now you can see that it is getting the data from the API. They're inside this list. And so now we just are yet to actually see this being outputted here. So let's close the settings file. And so we are getting the response data, but we aren't linking this the state data to the data property on the articles. So here we just have to say this .state.articles. And so I'm just going to keep this here for now, but we probably won't need that anymore. So now you can see the actual data is being rendered. There it is in the console, but we can actually close that now. And so there we go. So this is the first article. That was the second article. So it actually is working. But obviously there's a few fields that we're missing. And so that is just minor details that you can add on to the model to improve. And then just render the data here inside the component. So like for example, the description, just add a field onto the model, which is description, and then that data will be passed through all the way here, and the description field will be displayed. So as the last thing that we can try and implement, we've got this list view that is working, but now let's try and get the detail view working. So to get started with the detail view, we're just going to need to install something, which is the React Router DOM package. So I already have this installed, but it is the React Router DOM package. So just type npm install -- save and then React Router DOM. And basically what this is just used for is for redirecting inside our application. So for example, creating different pages, you would use React Router DOM for something like that. So let's run the server again. And we're going to want to start off by creating a routes file. And the routes file is basically just used for defining all the routes that we're going to want to display or contain. So we'll just say routes.js here. And we're going to need React from React. And then we're going to need a package or a component from the package, which is root. And that comes from React Router DOM that we just installed. And then I'm going to create this component-based router, which is just going to be a stateless component. And actually, it can just return JSX just like this. And we'll just export the default as base router. And so inside here, I'm going to return one div because this will be our one component that we are returning. And we're going to use this root component, which is a self-closing component. And here I'm just going to specify two paths. The first one is going to be to the list view, and the second one is going to be to the detail view. So I'm going to specify exactly this path. And the path is just going to be /. So when we go to this path, we'll display the list view. And the component to render, I'm going to import, which I'm going to take from here and cut that out, paste this here. That is the article list. So the article list component we want to display on that path. And then I'm just going to paste it, and I'm going to specify when there's an article ID. So this parameter, when you just specify a colon, meaning that this is the parameter. You can give this any name you want, but indicating this is a parameter. Then we would want the detail view component to be there. So with the base router, we can then import that into our app component. And I'll do this above the CSS. So I'll say import base router from roots. And then we're going to need the browser router component. So that also comes from the React router DOM package. And we're going to import it as router, just to be more clear. So now the router evaluates all the routes that we have, and depending on the path that we're on. So basically determining what needs to be rendered. But we've defined our custom layout, and the layout is meant to be displayed all the time. So the router, I'm going to specify here outside of the custom layout. And so basically this means the custom layout is still always going to be defined, well, displayed. But then here we want to put the base router to then evaluate what component needs to be displayed according to these routes here. So we don't need to import any of those views or those components in here except for the custom layout. And then every time you want to add a new route or new path, then you just add it here to the routes.js file. So if we check what this looks like, it's still working. And if I go to /1, then it's still working. Obviously, we want this to be a specific detail view, but it's still working at least. And so now we'll just want to create a new container, which is the detail view. So I'll just say article detail view.js, and I'll copy everything from the list view inside and paste that there. And we can close off the routes, and that should be enough for now. So here we don't need any of this. In fact, we don't need the articles, and we can just rename this detail and then export it as detail. We are not returning articles, and in the state we're only containing one article, which is an object. And so we still have the component did mount, but now we're not calling the base API rule API URL. We're querying the primary key of the article that we want to view. So inside this dynamic output here, this would be the ID that we want to call. And we can get this just by matching the property according to this article ID parameter. And so the way that we just do that is we'll just say, let's say constant article ID equals to this.props, and then we say match parameters dot article ID. So that will get the actual article ID, meaning if we went to /1, then the ID is 1, /2, the ID is 2. And then we just pass that in there. So meaning get that article from the database. And then we want to set the state of the article equal to the response data. And we can get rid of that. And then here we want to return something that displays the actual article. So I'm going to import another component from the Ant library. And this is the card component. And then here we'll just want to output that card. And I'm just going to specify the title, which will be the title of the article in the state. So we say state.article.title. And then here I'll just put a paragraph tag. And again, we'll say this.state.article.content. Great. So now let's take the article detail view, go to our routes, and we will import it as well. So we'll say import article detail, which comes from containers article detail. So now, if we go to, for example, /1, now we're only seeing, well, we're seeing a detail view of the article that we queried from the database, from the API. So it is working. So now let's just improve the navigation. So maybe add some links to go back to where we were. So we can go to the layout, and we'll just improve the navigation and the breadcrumbs. So I'll remove one of those breadcrumbs. And what I'll do is I'll import a component from the React root to DOM package. So import from React root to DOM. And this is the link component. And link just allows you to navigate a little bit better between paths. So we wrap it around whatever we want, kind of like an anchor tag. And we have to specify the to property, which is like a URL. So I'll say to is equal to slash. So when you click on list, it will take you to that path. So now if we check this out, we click on list, it takes us back. And now let's add a link here on the article. So we'll go to the article and we'll change the href tag here. So we would want this to be outputted dynamically as well, relative to the actual ID of the article. So here I'll just do that and then wrap this inside the dollar curly bracket. And this is the item ID. And we just want to put a slash in front of that. So meaning it's going to go to /1 or /2, but we want to pass the ID from our actual API. So let's go to the backend source articles, and we need to go to our API serializers and make sure that we're passing in ID here as one of the fields. Otherwise it won't work because we're not getting that data. And so now if we click on test 1, it takes us to 1 and we see the data being rendered. So it seems like it is working. So let's just close off those Python files, and I'm going to remove the footer from the article so that we don't have two footers being displayed. And so that seems fine. Our layout seems fine as well. Our roots are fine. And our article list, we could actually get rid of this because we're not using it. And we can get rid of the console log as well. And so our files are pretty clean now, but this is where I'm going to stop the tutorial. And I'm just going to talk about what you could improve or add on to basically finish this off. So basically, we have our article component here, which we took from the Ant library. And all we want to do is just basically get the data according to what we want to display here. So like we have the title, we're getting that. We have this description or content, we're getting that. But I think those are two different fields. So maybe we want to add another field on the model, which would be content. So what we would just do is we would go into the backend, go to models, add another field here. And let's say that would be description. So we would add description here. Then we'd go to the serializer, add that as the field in here as well. So description. And then we would go to our article list view. Let's just add that there. So we go to the article list view, and then we would still be passing the data in here. So we wouldn't even have to look at the article list view. We'd only need to look at article and just make sure that our fields are being outputted. So description is being called out. Content is somewhere, should be somewhere. So yes, content is here. So content is being outputted. So we just have to make sure that all of the fields are being outputted here on the article. And then in the detail view, same thing. We would just come here and add whatever we want to make this look good, and just make sure we're outputting that specific data on the model. And so that's the basic approach to how to make this work. Even though this is a basic tutorial, the concept is pretty straightforward, having the API and access to get that data and then just output it in a simple way using these components. So as some kind of assignment or way that you could try and improve this, maybe try and add some more functionality both on the back end and the front end. So for example, add a create view in our API, and meaning that you would be allowed to post to that specific route on the API, and then add an article create view here on the front end, so that which would have a form that you could fill in and create an article which would post to the database, add that to the database, and hence add one more article to the list of articles to display on the list view. So something like that would be one way to practice this out a little bit. So if you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to see something a little bit more in depth, then just leave a comment down below. And otherwise, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.